Now, what we're discussing today is the CIO's role in delivering value to the business. So, and the first criteria of that is you've got finite resources, you've got always more demand on business, what to do. And so the challenge in prioritization is determining where you're going to get best bang for your buck in the money you're spending. And so what I want to explore with you is your thoughts on how CIOs can get the best bang for their buck. Now, one of the challenges that people said to me is that prioritization is not an IT responsibility. It's a collective responsibility of the business to determine where they want the best outcomes. IT never owns the outcome of a project. It's a business person that will. So in many ways, IT has to be the catalyst for change, but it's got to be a more subliminal leader, if that's the right word, taking the business forward. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
I think, we've had this language of IT and the business for I think for as long as we can all remember. I think so maybe two parts to the answer. So yes, I completely agree that it's not IT's job to prioritize, but I think they've got arguably the greatest role in orchestrating that prioritization. I think there is a job to be done there to bring all of the various perspectives to bear to make the best decisions that an organization can. That's the first thing I'd say. The second thing I'd say is, if we can try and set aside that IT in the business, language, actually many IT professionals will have an incredibly important perspective and should have a very important influence on the discussion and the debate around what are the best choices and the best priorities, for our organization. If we can get that language, up to focusing on actually what matters for our customers, what matters for people in the team, what matters for the organization and the strategic outcomes it's trying to achieve. If everyone can kind of leave their IT and business kind of name tags to the side, then I actually think a lot of professionals in IT organizations have sometimes a unique perspective and a unique value to add to that conversation. And so I'd ask IT professionals not to kind of, not to relegate themselves in that conversation and think it's someone else holds all of the answers, but to really kind of step up and have a seat at that table and a voice in that conversation.
So what I'm hearing you say, Damon, is IT shouldn't see itself in a subservient role. It's an equal peer to the rest of the business and has a valid voice in forming that prioritization.
Yeah, that's right. And look, in the roles that that I've sat in, that you'd think about maybe as business roles, that's invaluable. You don't have all of the answers, you don't have all the expertise, you don't have all of the perspective. You are relying on your teammates who are deep technology professionals to be able to bring that perspective to the table. I think there's a job to be done there for IT professionals to be able to translate what they're thinking and what they're understanding into the language and the outcomes that the organization is thinking about. If you can see something that's really important through your lens of technology expertise, keep going until you can work out how to articulate why that's important to the business and its strategy, to the customers that business is serving, to the staff that make up that business. But I think if you can do that, then there's a need for that expertise to come into these conversations, frankly.
But Damon, I can't help feeling, I mean, I'm enthused to ask this question, given your pedigree and past, especially your time in Services New South Wales, where you're working with a charismatic leader who's got a sort of vision about where they want to go on the business, but you're the IT pragmatist of what's practical and what's not, and what are the challenges of fulfilling that ambition. How do you embrace the enthusiasm of the leadership, but ensure you don't end up in a wild goose chase on a romantic mission that may be not feasible?
I think in that context, there's a deep level of trust that underpins that relationship. And in New South Wales, there is in that example, there's a great there's a great foundation of trust and respect between the public service, and in that case the responsible minister and their office. That enables in a very safe way perspectives and expertise to be brought to bear, and there's an appreciation for, look, if this is the really ambitious outcome that we're trying to achieve, there's an appreciation for actually what are the things that are going to be critical to enable that, and how do we how do we consider them together. I don't think you can strive for these ambitious outcomes without valuing the things that enable them, and without being able to engage in a really informed discussion around what it's that classic kind of desirability, feasibility, whatever the last one is. I think there's a mature discussion in New South Wales around the need to consider all of these, and so different people will play different roles in that conversation. And some people's role in that conversation is to really, put the flag very, very high on the hill and hold the ambition for what great can look like. But on its own, without bringing those enabling expertise and the feasibility perspective to that, I think there's an appreciation that the ambition on its own doesn't necessarily make us successful.
Well, there's two things I picked up on there. The first, you've got to have a sense of trust between the two parties. So when people give advice, it's not seen as a naysayer. It's seen as actually you want to achieve the outcome. You want to help them, but you've got to realize the hurdles you've got to overcome to get to those things. And I thought there was also another thing I picked up is you've got to actually, before you start the journey, almost recognize these are the challenges that we have to overcome. So all of the stakeholders are aware of what are going to be what lies ahead.
Yeah, I think if you unpacked trust as the first part of that, I think there's two elements in play. One is, do I trust that we share the same aspiration? Do I feel like when we work together, we are actually on the same journey? I think that's the first thing. So do I trust in your intent? The second is, do I trust in your capability? And so I think both of those need to be quite strong. I think to your second point, I'm not sure if the answer is to identify all the challenges up front. I think the reality is we work in such complex environments, and actually that they are continuous processes of discovery. Some of it you can predict reliably up front, but many of the challenges and risks actually come out through that process of learning as you progress towards a goal. And so I think that building in the kind of regular reconnection, the regular learning, coming back together through the life of that journey and staying close rather than, thinking you've agreed the target and the plan up front and then making that your last conversation. I think that's key as well.
Yeah, well, and what I picked up there, Damon, is be careful of being too prescriptive ahead and trying to foresee everything. There is a journey that you're on. You sort of have an idea, the destination, what you want to go, but it's a descriptive journey, not a prescriptive thing that you need to get to on that.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And some of the things that we employed regularly in Service New South Wales, government may have an aspiration to achieve this very bold outcome that no one's quite sure, is that actually achievable? We would always lean into that, but we would then be very quickly working out how we get to the first proof point and how we get to the first learning and how we get to the first the first thread of that experience. Then how do we pilot that? So I think when we embarked on those journeys, that there was an understanding. Look, we're going to aim for this, but we can't all be 100% certain together right this second as we start whether it's achievable. But what we're going to do is we're going to get proof points very quickly, and we can keep planning and replanning very quickly. And I think that was partly key to our success. I think if we'd wanted to lock in certainty, in a false way up front, then we wouldn't have got people to the table. Everyone would have quite I think reasonably said, no, sorry, I can't sign up to that, to that ambition because you're asking me to give you certainty. I can't. Whereas we said, look, we don't need you to, we're not asking you to sign up in a false or ill-informed way to an outcome day one, but we are asking you to kind of jump in this boat with us and do everything you can to try and get us there. And then that trust and that collaboration enabled us to kind of chart our course from there.
Okay, can I pick up the point you said there about proof points? And can you give us a feel of what are the sort of proof points that give people reassurance that the journey's progressing successfully?
We use simple things. So firstly, we've got this thing we want to achieve. We'd try very quickly. If it's a digital experience, for example, we'd try very quickly to get that into some form of prototype or some form of high fidelity design to make sure actually the way it was described and the the visualization of that through an experience, are they actually the same thing? And sometimes what we think we mean and how that's interpreted can be. So we'd try and get from ideas and words to screenshots and prototypes nice and quickly. That would flush out this misunderstanding. We'd try and get to minimum viable products nice and quickly. We would try and pilot everything we did wherever possible. Hey, we've built this thing. We think we've built the right thing. We've been working with customers along the way. We think it works, but is it actually going to work in the lives of people in the way that we expect it to? And so, how do we build piloting in as something that again gives us learning and de-risks us on our way to to a statewide outcome, as an example. So there are lots of the techniques that we all kind of know and love and talk about from the agile space, if you like, but applied in a very pragmatic way.
But you're saying the proof point has to be something almost tangible or visible to people to give them confidence that the journey's progressing well.
That was, I think so. And look, we tried to, I think there's a real human nature thing, which is if we have a conversation and then you run away and work hard and I don't hear from you for a long period, the longer I don't hear from you, the more nervous I start to get, right? And then, if our trust isn't strong, then maybe I start to wonder, is anything really happening? Is anything going on? So we try and make that progress nice and visible and tangible. We don't like to go quiet for too long, and I think that's what enables us to kind of maintain the confidence and the sponsorship through those journeys.
The task that Service New South Wales is always celebrated for is the vehicle registration. The number of people that tell me what a magnificent ability it is to do that on Saturday without having to give up half a day of my life to register a car. I mean, everyone salutes you for that. But I assume you didn't release that immediately. There would have been, was it people in Dubbo or somebody like that was the pilot site for it? And how did you know to go from pilot to into production, all production?
Yeah, I think our digital driver's license, from memory, we may have piloted that initially in Dubbo. A couple of things. Those pilots, they're not really a test of the technology. That's not what they're about. But they're a test of how your customers experience your service. And so, really deliberately choosing your pilot, and making sure it's got the right diversity in it, so that you surface a range of learnings. But those pilots would enable us to build both quantifiable and qualitative, quant and qual style inputs around how an experience was going. Do people like it? Are we getting a thumbs up or a thumbs down for this? And if everyone's giving us a thumbs down, that's a pretty strong message that we're not ready to go forward. And then often the most important opportunities for improvement came through in the qualitative feedback that we'd get through those pilots as well. New South Wales is diverse. Maybe it's more diverse than some of us would expect. And sometimes we're tempted to crudely say, well, okay, there's metropolitan Sydney and then there's regional New South Wales, but even regional New South Wales it's a myriad of diverse communities, and so making sure you've got that diversity of perspective is the is the way a digital driver's license is going to work for a young driver in Dubbo, is that the same way that someone will want to use it if they were one of our more elderly drivers in Newcastle, and designing pilots that will give you that sort of breadth of learning and help you understand whether you've got a product that is truly of the standard that your customers need and expect from you is invaluable.
Okay. One of the things we talk about is value, and you mentioned there you've got to have something quantifiable. So I'm seeing, and most people would see value in some ways as a financial metric, but value can be saving a citizen time, and to put it bluntly, making a political party more electable because they're doing something that delights citizens and things like that. How do you quantify maybe more intangible values that are being generated?
Look, it's a great question. I think it's a question that think about what's the same versus different between private and public sector as an example. I think this is one of the areas where the definition of value can look a bit different. At its core, what is the value that is created through Service New South Wales? I think it creates value in the form of trust. I think it has improved the trust between in our case, government and the people and the communities that it is here to serve and support. That trust builds engagement. That engagement builds adoption. Adoption drives outcomes. So at a macro level, that's kind of the core of the value, that proposition, I think, of Service New South Wales. Now we delivered and deliver hundreds, thousands of different services. Those different services will have different roles to play in the lives of people and businesses, and different success measures. And so it's the intersection of the two. As a whole, are we building that foundation of trust? Are we making government accessible, and not just accessible for some, but accessible for all? But then take an initiative like Diamond Discover. Well, it was about rebuilding consumer confidence. As we came out of COVID, it was about re-energizing and reactivating the custom that our businesses needed to recover from those from that very difficult period. So we were looking at things like, well, actually, are people getting these vouchers? Are they using these vouchers? Are they contributing their own spend on top of the value of the voucher? Are people using these vouchers across New South Wales, or only in some places? And is there more we need to do to foster adoption in other places? So the specific value that program was trying to create is complementary but different to the overall value that an organisation like Service New South Wales creates.
You mentioned private and public, and I want to look at your time at Woolworths, which would strike me as an intensely transactional environment. You're shopping every day, volumes coming in. I would think in an environment like that, you don't often have the time to think, the luxury of actually, people want outcomes almost immediately because of the nature of the business. How do you satisfy people in that environment?
I think every industry, maybe every organisation, had its own culture. There is a, I can only speak to my couple of years at Woolworths, but there's a beautiful pragmatism to retail. There's a no nonsenseness I found to retail, and an ability to execute. But that, in my experience, that didn't translate to an absence of strategic thinking. And organisations like that are big organisations, and they're complex, and they've got many customers they serve. They actually need to be very thoughtful, and they're scaled organisations. They actually need to be very thoughtful around where they're going to place their bets, and how they test and learn before they scale those out. If they get the ranging wrong and don't understand that and run forward with that can have very significant consequences. So, I found, in my experience, that there was some very good thinking up front, and often good learning up front, and then once they felt they'd found the sweet spot, then a very impressive ability to execute and scale that, in my experience.
But the challenge can be in those environments, Damon. Don't tell me how to run this business. I've been in retail for 25 years. I know this thing, son. You know, you're just a new kid on the block. And yet IT has all this sort of new ideas that are evolving and coming down the line. And you want to say, hey, have you thought about this? How do you have that sort of dialogue with someone who's so across their business?
I think it's a great question. And I think, most places will have their version of that. So I don't think that's unique to retail. Look, I think maybe three observations. I think trust matters. I think you're not going to listen to someone that you don't trust. And so, if you're in an organization where, as an IT professional, you don't feel you've got that trust with your colleagues in non-IT roles, I'd be thinking about, how do you build that? How much of that is relationship? How much of that is about getting some runs on the board on the things that matter? Some of the things that we did, really simple things in Woolworths, to close that distance between the technology organisation and the lines of business. In some ways, we took technology out of the back room a little bit. We created a tech centre in a very very public, well-trafficked part of the main support office there. And instead of technology support being this help desk that I had to ring, in a queue I needed to get through, and raise a ticket, well, all of a sudden, if my laptop was broken, I could walk to the tech desk. It wasn't IT anymore. It was Hazel and the team, and they were helpful. And I could drop my laptop off, and they'd just give me my replacement. I could get back to work. Little things like that, all of a sudden took IT from this faceless thing to something personal and really helpful. So I think trust matters. I think, how do you close that gap?
Can I just come in there one way? Sorry, Damon, because we talk about transparency, but we always think of transparency as a behavior, so people don't see you're hiding anything. But what you're saying there is transparency can be a physical thing, so people actually you're visible to the rest of the organization much more. You should think consciously where you locate an IT team so people don't see it as a back office.
So, and I think there's a piece there around, actually, how do technology teams start to think like customer service teams? If we know that Monday morning is where we get the most people forgetting their password and locking themselves out and that sort of stuff, well, maybe a great experience is at 9 o'clock, there's an IT person that's walking the floor saying, put your hand up if you're locked out, and I'll come and help. Maybe that's a much better experience than me going, oh, bloody hell, I've got to ring a help. I think we've got to get ourselves in the customer service mindset and game to a degree. The other point I was going to make was, I don't think the job of an IT professional is to know, the subject matter of their business, their 20-year veteran in the business, even better than that person does. That's not the goal. There's got to be enough knowledge to be able to contribute. But then where's the complementary value? If I'm a deep specialist in one aspect of the business, often the value of the technologist is you can see across the business in a way that many other teams don't and can't. And so that's often the perspective, not to know my piece better than me, but to be able to actually broaden my perspective and connect dots in a way that I might not necessarily do, or to be able to show me enough of the potential that technologies, could create, that we can then start to combine our expertise to work out how we might apply them to better outcomes in a particular business.
Damon, I've got more questions, but I think we've only got a half an hour discussion. I've got 2 other people to interview. Well, I'm sure we're going to have a good discussion. But it is about that value proposition, and it is the discussion how we engage with business, and we can be the catalyst for ideas. How we foster that trust in people that we can be the proponent of those ideas, and people listen to our suggestions and take them forward. So I think that's probably an area I'd like to explore in the panel.
I think so, and I think think about what business, if you're in an IT team or an IT, think about what business you're in. If I'm the manager of end user computing, or whatever we're calling it, what business am I in? Am I in the business of laptops and Windows and patching and and apps, or am I in the business of employee experience and employee performance and employee productivity? A lot of a lot of the stuff will be the same between that, but the way I see my value will be very, very different, and the things it will lead me to value and do, I think, will be very, very different. And so that'd be my sort of parting thought there.
That's a great parting thought. Damon, I look forward to meeting you on the panel in about 3 weeks.
Wait, Peter. See you there.
Thanks a lot. Cheers. Goodbye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.